You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
And I'm here today with Ishveen Anand, who started Open Sponsorship several years back. So I wanted to learn about that origin story. So what the catalyst was for you to decide to build this platform to tap into the sports sponsorship model. And maybe it extends beyond sports as well, but I think of it as sports.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Kevin. So it was kind of serendipitous where I was a student athlete all my life, and then I graduated. I was working in consulting, but I knew that I wanted to basically be in the sports industry in some shape or form. I thought I wanted to give back and get more South Asian girls playing sports, but someone kind of told me, well, sponsorship, why don't you start there? And, introduced me to my boss to be. So I kind of fell into sponsorship marketing almost by mistake. But once I was in it, I just thought that the industry was amazing. I'm sure there's probably a lot of listeners here who think sponsorship's kind of scary and expensive and it doesn't really make sense. And how do you even get started? But it's actually very addictive. And you see the retention. Once a brand does sponsorship, they tend to do it again and again and again. And just being able to buy your way onto the field of play, have your logo displayed in iconic moments of games, meet athletes, make your childhood dreams come true. So I just thought sponsorship marketing was amazing, but I thought deal making was very difficult. Didn't really make sense. It wasn't very meritocratic. And in a time when, you have Facebook ads and they're so efficient, you have programmatic buying for TV. I couldn't understand why sponsorship was so hard and old school. And so that's really how I set up the company to solve those problems.
Yeah, I've had to do old school style sponsorship deals in the past, and the number of layers between agents and lawyers really almost became an unstoppable headwind for most marketers, particularly smaller ones. The bigger ones could forge their way through. So is part of your mission to sort of democratize sponsorship for the small to medium-sized marketer as well?
100%. Even when we were doing deals, and I was working a lot with teams and even bigger athletes, and the entry price points were fine, they were manageable, but there was this perception of oh my gosh, it's going to cost so much, or it's going to cost so much in lawyer fees. And one of the reasons why we've done so well is because with the rise of influencer marketing, there's a trend by marketers they want to A/B test. They want to do, short campaigns, very topical. If the Super Bowl's next month, I want to do something for Super Bowl, but I don't necessarily want an NFL player for a year and a half. And so now if you're going to do small deals that require less money, you don't really want to be paying lawyers. And like you said, you don't want to be negotiating for months. And so a lot of our kind of value add with a platform is the fact that you can do deals very quick. A lot of people think it was lastminute.com. And then what that means is that you don't have this overhead of expenses or time that most marketers just don't have.
Absolutely. I sort of think about, sponsorships coming in several different flavors. Obviously, sports celebs have been doing in-person appearances outside of their actual gameplay for many years. And of course, now with digital, even that can go digital as far as you can do an appearance, but not do an in-person appearance, more of a virtual one. So how does the demand and the supply of what's on your platform lay out across sort of the actual in-game type sponsorships, or sponsorships that are very tightly coordinated into the gaming experience versus more of the celebrity appearance type sponsorships?
Yeah, great question. I'd say actually a lot. So in our universe, so we have 11,000 athletes, which includes 70% of the NFL, the NBA, a lot of Olympians, lacrosse players, we cover 150 sports. And then on the other side, we have a network of thousands of brands. And what I'd say for sports is it's quite hard to be involved in the game. Golf and tennis, but even tennis, if you're a partner with Nike, they buy everything on you. So a lot of what we're doing is the off-field stuff. So that could be traditional sponsorship where it's like 12-month, 24-month deal, photo shoots, like social, billboard, everything, appearances. And then on the other extreme is I'm going to work with you once, I'm going to send you product, you're going to post about it on your social feeds. The good thing today is it's so cheap for me to go and redistribute that content across social. Back in the day, you would have to then go and buy a TV spot, and then you'd have to pay for ad dollars and all of this to get eyeballs on your ad. Today, you just, obviously it has its organic reach, but then you can boost it for $100 on Facebook and it gets even more reach. And so I think what's really happening is, going back to the democratization, not only are we giving more access, but it is now cheaper to do these deals and get visibility on them than it ever has been before.
That's really great. I noticed on your platform, there's a section in the process called deliverables, right? So how should marketers think about the deliverables? And is the sky the limit on deliverables? Are there sort of prepackaged sort of buckets of deliverables that people should think about as they're putting together a proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they try and build something that is like completely separate to their strategy. It's like, traditionally you'd have like a marketing team and then you'd have sponsorship like down the corridor, and like you wouldn't even communicate. And that's when it doesn't really work, because everyone else is working together. And so, when someone comes to us and they say, YouTube is our preferred platform, but with you guys, we're going to test out Instagram. I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, that doesn't make sense. It might be a smaller pool of athletes who are on YouTube, but if that's what works for you, use us for the same thing. And so I would say, like, when you think about deliverables, if what you need is like logo visibility, right? Like, there are some brands out there that it's just however much you can see the logo is great because they're trying to get validation and trust or whatever else. Then great, use a logo like a tennis player and sponsor their cap or whatever else. But if what you need is great content, then let's use social, and then maybe don't even get the athlete to post it on their social feeds if that's not what you care about, just content. Or if you're doing this we've worked with companies who use sponsorship for HR and like employee retention, like to come in and tell our employees how amazing our company is and whatever else. So if that's what you need, then great, like don't do something else. So I'd say like athletes are great at sports. Sponsorship is great at like basically amplifying what you're already doing, bringing more ROI to your actual activities. It doesn't work as well if you start trying to create a new strategy, unless you have a lot of money and you can build a whole strategy around it.
Right. So for marketers who are trying to think about the nuances, how would you describe the differences between sort of a sponsorship versus endorsement versus appearances? And then you've just got mentions, like product mentions.
Yeah.
So there's clearly a continuum, and you can sort of mix and match. So how would you recommend marketers think about those?
Yeah, I mean, I think sponsorship includes everything. Like, influencer marketing for me is a type of sponsorship, obviously within the celebrity level. Appearances, like meet and greets. Like, if you have if you've got a booth at a trade show and you get an athlete or anyone to come by, a celebrity to come by to drive more customers to stop by your booth, or whatever it may be, get new customers, that's a form of sponsorship. So I'd say it all falls within sponsorship. The main thing is to come in and say, and this is what I like about what we do, where we basically say that we have the power of data and the platform and transparency, which is great. Think of us like a LinkedIn or a Tinder, Match.com, but we also have the expertise of a sports marketing agency. So I like it when brands come into us and say, hey, this is our KPI that we're trying to hit. Can sports sponsorship achieve that? And when you look at team deals, which we're increasingly doing more of, you often go into the team and say, listen, my objective is sales. Great. Who are you selling to? C-suite. Cool. That's why you get a box. Or my objective is sales. Who are you selling to? Well, the stadium audience. Cool. But let's get a space for you to sell or have a pop-up shop or whatever else. And so I think it's really important to come in and say, okay, what's your objective? And then let experts like us or whoever to come in and like help devise a strategy.
Great. Well, you mentioned teams. Obviously, there's players, there's teams, and in some cases, there's the venue interaction as well. So are a lot of marketers sort of testing out different things at the same time, like lots of different athletes and lots of different teams to sort of, I guess, hedge their bets against, putting all of their eggs into one team or all of their eggs into one player?
We're definitely seeing that a lot more. On the athlete side, it's much easier. The only problem with it is around when someone comes in and say, okay, we're going to try with a really niche athlete, and if it works, we'll build up. Sometimes that doesn't translate as well. But obviously it's hard to immediately come in and spend 8 figures on LeBron James, even if it's worth it. And so I quite like that mid-level where, you're using NFL, NBA players, not the most famous guys on the team, but definitely recognizable, maybe more relevant locally or to a targeted audience. You're spending maybe like $5,000 to $8,000 on the athlete for social content. You can then take that content and do a lot with it, or you can get testimonials and do a lot with it. So I'd say that I think is a sweet spot when you have like anything above 5K per athlete is great. If you're doing like testing for sales, if you're testing for like content and just community, then to be honest, like I love that too, where I actually say that sponsorship and the influencer marketing is basically the new age of word of mouth, right? Back in the day, like people would have your product and they would go out and like, tell their friends. Today, what's happening is we do a lot of product seeding. So literally like people will give us a subscription, they'll come in, they'll gift product to athletes, and then they'll basically say like, put it on your social feeds. But if your social media following is like less than 10,000 followers, then basically your feed is your friends. So it's basically word of mouth marketing at scale. So I also love those kind of deals as well.
Great. Well, back when I was at a traditional agency many, many years ago, whenever things were done with sports influencers or celebrities, most brands had a command and control mentality around scripts. And I sort of feel like now many brands have really started to empower their influencers, including sports influencers and celebrities, to really ad lib and be more impromptu, make it more authentic. So what's the right balance there, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I'd say that I think it's important to get across some key points that you care about as a brand, because it's so, I think it's really frustrating for a brand if the athlete posts and you're like, well, you didn't say it tastes better, or you didn't say it was better than the competition, or whatever it may be. So I think it is really important to tell the athlete, hey, these are the kind of things I would love for you to touch on, like maybe 1, 2, 3 of these. Also where you want them to direct. So these are things that we've built into our platform, like are there coupon codes, are there UTM links that you want them to attack to, or whatever else. So I think you do have to give some sort of guide. But what I think works really well is basically saying, take it where you want to take it. Like, where would you use our product, or how, like, it doesn't have to be in a car or on the field or in a locker room. Like, let it be natural to you. But I think the caption is really important, but the imagery is probably less so. But having said that, like, if you think it's really important that your bottle faces forward so the label is shown, if you are, if you're an apparel brand and you're like, it was interesting, we worked with a brand and they had given like shorts and sneakers, and the athlete was topless. And some brands may have loved that, right, or not cared, but they were like, we didn't really love that. That's not, that's not our vibe. Like, it's not our DNA. So I think it is important to like sometimes hash out some of these things, unless all you're going for is like virality. And then in that case, you just want the athlete to like be as funny and provocative or whatever else. But if you do have brand guidelines, it is sometimes important to get them across.
Are you finding that your platform is mostly in-house marketers using it, and then using you essentially as the agency or the strategic advisor or creative advisor, or are agencies equally engaging with your platform and just using you as a secondary support system?
Yeah, great question. I'd say it's about 70% brand direct and about 30% is agency. What's interesting about agency is it's actually interesting to see the evolving agency like landscape. So we work with a lot of affiliate agencies who are being given budgets to deploy across new channels of affiliate. And obviously they need to have some sort of upfront budget to work with athletes, or not obviously, they can do product seeding, but I find we don't do as much with the bigger brand agencies, whereas it's more like the niche, like local, digital, affiliate, obviously influencer, PR as well. So I think the same way that you could say we're democratizing access to brands, I feel like previously, if you wanted to have a sports strategy, you had to have like a sports agency. Whereas now, I feel like we are democratizing access to the agency landscape to be able to offer athlete sports sponsorship, athlete influencer marketing to their clients.
Back when I was doing some of the bigger deals in my big agency days before I did it, when a big brand was going after a big sports celebrity or traditional celebrity, there was category level exclusivity that they were looking for, and so there was essentially like a blacklist of other brands that influencer or sports or celebrity couldn't do a deal with, and sometimes the exclusivity even extended beyond the period of time that the creative was used. So it actually had sort of a overlap effect. Do you find that people are requesting those same levels of category exclusivity with the sports celebrities that they're doing deals with on your platform?
Yeah, great question. Not so much. In fact, so when we do deals, we have like a templatized contract, as I was saying, to avoid the need for like lawyers and overheads and things like that. And so we have terms and conditions. So things like ability to use name, image, likeness for 6 months. You can't delete the social post for 6 months. You can't disable comments. What else do we like? I'm trying to think about what else is in there. Like, you must give us the ability to whitelist or whatever else, like a lot of social deliverables. Exclusivity is one that we have purposefully left out of our template because we don't believe it should go in unless it's a bigger deal, right? It just doesn't make sense. You have to pay too much for it. As a athlete, it's not very, like, sometimes it's interesting as well, because sometimes brands are like, well, if they don't, we want people who, if you think about like the traditional influencer world, what is a beauty blogger? A beauty blogger is someone who spends all their time, every single post, talking about beauty products. There's it's the opposite of exclusivity. Same for fashion, right? Same for mommy blogger. It's like every day she's probably reviewing new toys and nappies and whatever else. Yet suddenly when you get to athletes, you're like, oh, we need exclusivity. Oh, but they're not authentic. They don't have the audience. And so it's kind of like counterintuitive, because if you would go to like a fitness influencer who reviews vitamins every day, yet with an athlete, if you want them to be exclusive, then they've probably not got the audience that follows them for vitamins. And so we believe that like exclusivity comes if you're doing a long-term contract where you can really build up like authenticity and story. Otherwise, the athlete has to do that themselves. Otherwise, they're not going to be authentic to your product.
Yeah, another question on authenticity is obviously most brands would prefer that the athlete at least certainly be aware of the brand, preferably already a brand user, right? And so is there an initial back and forth, I wouldn't really call it during the negotiation, but during the get acquainted period, where perhaps the marketer wants to sort of get an authentic point of view from the athlete as to whether or not they actually like the product or not?
Yeah, great question. So the way that we mostly do our campaigns is, so think of it as a bit like a LinkedIn, where you can come in and you can search through athletes and you can say, obviously crypto is big at the moment. So you could say like, show me athletes who've talked about crypto, or like, show me athletes who've talked about toddlers or nappies or pets or dogs, whatever it may be. And you can sort that by like their demographic following, the content they've posted and whatever else. And you can see a perfect athlete and send them what we call a direct proposal, a bit like a job offer. But most of our brands, what they do is they come in and they build a campaign similar to a job posting. And it'll be like looking for athletes who have dogs, who want to feed their dogs healthy food, whatever else. And you can ask questions. So it is really interesting because, we worked with Levi's and they were like, have you got a pair of Levi's? What's your favorite one? And they're really big on that. Some of the newer brands, obviously you've never worked with them, but what they really want to know is that same authenticity. So like, it's like, what pedigree is your dog? How old is he? How do you, they'll ask questions to try and figure out, are you legit or not? We actually just ran a campaign with a music label, and it was really interesting because they were like, what's your cool idea for how you're going to show our music? Are you a fan of this rapper already? And so I think that's how like brands are doing it. But what I really like about the way we do things, but generally is like, and I'm sure you know this, Kevin, like, some brands, I'll give you an example. We had a brand who had an application from a pole dancer, and they were like, why are we getting an application from a pole dancer? That's not an athlete. We're offended. We're like, well, it's a marketplace. I mean, you can't, we're not stopping. And then some brands would be like, that's so cool. She represents feminism, and, it's alternative and it's different, and the content is great or versa. So I think it's really important. And this is what we really believe is let people choose what they want to put out there and how they want to qualify in and out. Like, some people want more risk averse athletes. Some people want slightly edgier athletes. And I think that's like the beauty of what we're doing with a marketplace, similar to dating or anything else, is like, let both sides decide versus us trying to create everything.
Right. So if there are folks listening to this interview who are sort of new to influencer marketing, and maybe in particular new to using sports celebrities as influencers for their product or service, where do you recommend that they start? Should they have a budget and work it back from that, or should they have a bunch of marketing KPIs and work it based on their marketing KPIs?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I would say having your KPI is really important. Having a budget is less so versus having a KPI, in my opinion. So when you come into, like, it's free to sign up to ours, and then you'll be able to see different campaigns. Now, if you are doing product seeding, the chances are you're going to get smaller influencers. They're going to give you lovely content, but it's not going to drive a lot of traffic. Like, it's just not. Now, if you're looking for traffic, then yeah, you got to have some sort of budget. And again, we kind of help you to see that. If you're looking to impress your boss and he's a massive NBA fan, when you do a deal with the sixth guy on the bench and he's not that impressed, like, that's going to happen, right? So I think budget and expectation are so hand in hand that you can't really like separate them. And as I said, I don't think it's always the case of like, okay, I'm going to start small, and if it works, I'm going to scale up. I just, it just doesn't work. Like, it's the same as in TV. If you're like, I'm going to advertise on a very local channel at like midnight, and if it works, then next time I'll get a slot at like 6 p.m. on NBC. It's not the same thing. So I think those are a couple of like my hints and tips to new people.
Great. And I always like to make sure that at least a somewhat sizable paid ad boost budget is available, right? So the build it and they will come model doesn't necessarily always work with social. A lot of the platforms have really depreciated organic reach, even for celebrities. And so unless you're willing to go in there and boost things up, you may not get the reach that you want. So
I'd also say on that note, Kevin, that it's not like what you're saying is like, have you got your own distribution channel? So I would liken it like, if you have a mailing list of 50,000 emails, which, is very doable for a lot of people. Now, the performance of most of your emails, let's say you get like a 10% or like 15% open rate, like 5% click-through rate, or whatever it may be. Now, imagine if your product is genuinely interesting to athletes and vice versa. So let's say that you are a supplement brand, or it could not even be that. It could be like a baby product, right? And now your next email that goes out and it's like, check out this NFL player and his, bedtime routine with his toddler, for example. The chances are that it is going to get more opens, right? Your subject line, including NFL, a cute story, the validation on an NFL player, maybe that you build a landing page where his picture is on that he put on Facebook or whatever else. And so what I would say is like, it's really important, the same thing as you're saying, like, it's not build it and they will come. It's, do you have the ability to like do something with that? And as I said, like today, it's so easy to put it in your mailing list. It costs you nothing. You just have to give it to your content team. We all probably have like press releases. that you can pay now $39 and put out a press release. Like put out a press release, like NFL player working with, baby product, like validates, put in a testimonial. Like, so I would say like it's the amplification that really makes the big difference here that you could never do before, because you couldn't just get a bit of content from them. Like you'd have to pay all of this money and do a production day and everything else just to get that. Whereas now you can take that one piece of content and do so much with it. So if you're a scrappy like growth marketer or entrepreneur who has like a bit of marketing pizzazz, this is the best time, like literally the best time to be doing these deals and inserting them across your marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan of getting as much mileage as possible out of both any form of earned media, whether it's PR, digital PR, social media, earned social media, but also even for influencer marketing is don't think of it as a very narrow time window. Think about how you're going to use it over an extended period of time and, really, create a longer standing campaign. Obviously your platform's still relatively new. What's sort of the longest, do you have any thoughts on sort of, or recollection of a marketer who was able to get just a tremendous amount of mileage out of a relationship that they forged on your platform?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously we've done like longer term deals. So we did a deal for a group of like walking clinics in Chicago with Chris Bryant, and it was an 18-month deal. And, they used it for his image on billboards, radio, recruitment, we really told them, like, think about the challenges that you're facing today and you think you're going to face in the next like 12 months. And they were like, well, we definitely know that recruitment is going to be challenged. So great, let's get Chris recording like, hey, join the family, join the Midwest Express family, like great place to work. And they said it really boosted their applications. But then, they did other things. They did like charity. They have to get gifted one of the deliverables to one of their charitable partners, which was brilliant, right? So I'd say like longer term deals are great for that. I've loved when we've worked with newer brands, and what they do is they use that content and they use a lot of our athletes, even if they're not that famous. Like, an NFL player is an NFL player, even if you don't know. I'm sure we've all been in a bar and someone's like, there's an NBA player, or an NFL player here, or there's an Olympian, there's an athlete there. And you're like, I don't know who it is, but that's cool. There was like, a player out in the same bar as me. And so, even when you have your own website and you have testimonials, you could have the testimonial from like Ishveen and it not might mean much, or you could have a testimonial. And even if you don't have to like know the name, golfer, female golfer, professional golfer, Amy, right? It kind of means a little bit more, right? And so having like things across your website, these little bits of validation, I really like that. And you can keep that up for a year on your website, even if you paid them $500 to do one thing. Like if in the contract, it'll say like, as I said, like tick a box, rights to name and image use for 12 months. And these athletes, like they also think it's cool to be on your website, right? Like it's brand building for them. So I just think like being able to, as you said, like get mileage for the longer term is just epic.
Yeah, the one other thing that I think really is interesting, where I think it's stronger with sports than it is with other forms of celebrities, is the people's emotional response to sports is higher. And I don't know if that's part of what drove you to sort of focus on sports other than your own passion for sports. But I find that, while there are certain people who really love gossip magazines and love to follow Hollywood or music, that there's sort of the sort of tribalism of sports to some extent. It increases the emotional impact that sports celebrities have on individuals from a marketing perspective. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, I love, I think the thing is actually a really good point that we've not touched upon, which is like the story. Like one of the big things for me with athletes is like, they've like toiled all their life to be this person. They've, fought against like, most of us are quite like, not most of us, I'm sporty, but I didn't have it to be a professional athlete. And that's something special, right? And a lot of times, the previous world, we're seeing it more now with Players Tribune, but that's at the very elite level. These stories are not told. So as a brand, being able to work with, an athlete and tell their story, especially when they're younger, that's also great. And so one of my favorite ones actually was, we worked with a medical brace company, or like compression socks, like they made like equipment for athletes, and they did like a whole podcast, and they got like someone involved to talk about his injuries and say like, what injuries have you had? This is what we would have done. And it was just really interesting. And so I think one of the things with athletes is like, whether it's Emma Raducanu, and we didn't know her, and then she becomes this huge thing, and like her story and her relationship with her parents, with influencers, you're not questioning their relationship with their parents and their family, and like, were they taken to little league games by their dad, and how close are they to their siblings? And I think there's so much beauty around that. And I think brands have a real opportunity to tell the stories with these athletes, which is just, it's just epic.
Yeah, I think that you make a great point from a planning perspective. Is if you can tap into the journey, right, that the athlete has taken through their lives, and somehow overlay that into the brand, if it's relevant to the brand, that could be really powerful. It does seem like you may end up with a better success if someone sort of creatively directs it a little bit, as opposed to just sort of winging it. Like, do the research on the celebrity, do the research on the star, try to understand, read their Wikipedia, read their socials, really sort of dig in and understand, so that you can, weave the right story.
Well, I think like that's one of the reasons why it's such a simple feature that we built. It's so crazy. Like, I love the idea of like our questions. Like, so we did a campaign with Gillette for Father's Day, and they wrote like, something about like, tell us a story about your father. And in the platform, what you can do is you can go in and invite athletes to apply. So they went in and they invited a few athletes to apply to the campaign. And a couple of athletes responded, declined the invite, and said, I don't know my father. And I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful as well, right? Like, being able to turn it around and maybe do something for the people who didn't. And so I think like the beauty of again, like the marketplace and the volume of people is like, if you put up a thing and it said like, tell us your organic story, tell us why, we work with this brand called Gutsy, and it's like, tell us what's your gutsy story, like what have you done, and like let the athlete pitch. And of course, like, we do have a lot of athletes who are managed on our platform by big agencies, and some athletes that don't really invest as much time writing a pitch, but that is self-selective as well, right? Where if you want someone who's authentic and says, hey, this is my story, like, I fell off a horse, or I did this or did that, then that. So I think what I like about what we do is we're not making you do the research. What we're making the athlete, who is eventually going to benefit from the sponsorship deal, we're making them put the effort in, which also tends to lead to a higher successful campaign because it started off the right way.
Right. So is there a way for the marketer to know whether or not there's an agent intermediary or a handler, or whether they'll actually be having a conversation with the celebrity?
So we do. So we actually publish on the profile whether it's the athlete direct, whether it's an individual agency, as in like someone smaller, or whether it's a talent agent like CAA or, Rock Nation. I would say that sometimes we do love our agency partners, and having another level of accountability is quite useful, especially if they're bigger. I think with the smaller athletes, it's great. You have your own relationship. But I have noticed with some of the bigger athletes, like it can help to have someone else who's incentivized to get the deal done.
Great. Well, any final tips for folks who are, going to embark on sports influencer marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like there's nothing like the present. So obviously go on open sponsorship and sign up and check it out. Every single budget is accessible, right? If you believe that your product or your business is relevant to athletes, which of course, how could it not be? There's female, male, there's, I love athletes because you've got like Hispanic, African-American, Caucasian, like everyone. And I'd say just really like amplify, like, even like for me, it was so funny. We had a PR agency, and every time we got PR, he would be like, put it on your LinkedIn, because he knew that my personal LinkedIn would get as many views as like anyone else, right? Which I'm sure is the same with you, Kevin. So, as an entrepreneur, being able to turn around and be like, so cool, NFL player or an Olympian today used my product, so proud. that causes, that creates the ripple effect. So it doesn't have to be like this big shiny campaign. It could just be like a couple of people here and there that you shout out to, and it goes from there. So get started. It's fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.